Last time on Franchise History TV, we discussed the origins of the film company, New Line Cinema, now under the Warner Brothers Discovery label. It was a small film company that birthed Freddy Krueger and many other notable films that we all know and love. Well, since it's October, and since this is a perfect time to cover the character that led New Line Cinema to the green, Freddy Krueger will be the subject of this video. Freddy has become a pop culture icon, listed as by Wizard Magazine 14th greatest film villain of all time. I think that's disputable, but that's for another video. Freddy has not only appeared in films, but appearing in toy lines, comic books, shoes, TV shows, video games since his inception in the fall of 1984. Now let's take a look back. Sit around the campfire and let's look at the history of Freddy Krueger. Now, Freddy Krueger's roots go all the way back to the early life of legendary film director Wes Craven. Dating back to the 1970s, he came across an article in the LA Times about the Hmong refugees from Southeast Asia. They was fleeing the war to the US. Most of the men suffered disturbing nightmares and refused to sleep. Well, unfortunately, these men would pass away in their sleep as well. The condition was called the Asian Death Syndrome. I guess this is something that stuck with Craven. As a side note, the Elm Street part, the street down Elm Street, was actually from Craven's film students whose projects was actually created on Elm Street in the state of New York. So just a little tidbit on that. But in another inspiration for Freddy in the film series, in Craven's earlier days, he saw an elderly man walking outside of his house. And I guess this man was creepy to Craven, especially when the man looked straight into Craven's face as Craven was looking out the window, and then the man would walk off. To add, Craven came up with the name Freddy Krueger after a bully from his childhood named Fred Krueger, and the famous sweater colors actually came from Craven reading an article finding out that red and green are clashing to the human retina. So I guess that's why Christmas colors are green and red and attractive. But anyways, Craven put all these inspirations together, and originally Freddy was intended to be a child diddler, but became a child deleter to avoid exploiting the high cases of child diddling in California in the 1980s. Craven did not want another masked villain. There was enough of them at the time. There was Leatherface, Jason Voorhees, and Mike Myers. So he had to get to the drawing board and think about something different. He wanted Freddy to show emotion, taught his victims, so he decided Krueger should be burned and carry the iconic knife gloves instead of carrying a regular knife. I guess Craven considered a sickle at one point in time during the early production, but the iconic weapon of choice was better. It was new. Craven has described Krueger as the worst of parenthood and adulthood, a dirty man that wants children to perish instead of prospering in life. The absolute boogeyman and the worst fear for the children. Now, Nightmare on Elm Street almost did not get off the ground. Craven began writing the script of Nightmare on Elm Street actually back in 1981 after the production of The Swamp Thing. See, Craven pitched an idea of Krueger to various studios such as Walt Disney, who really wasn't known for blood and gore, but the studio was interested only if Craven toned down the violence and made it more kid-friendly.
You serious?
Yeah, that wasn't going to work. Paramount said no, because a similar film that the studio was pushing by the name of Dreamscape was on its way in 1984 as well. And then it was Universal Studios who told Craven to hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more. Craven actually posted a rejection letter from Universal in his office as motivation. But then there was New Line Cinema, a small film studio that saw an opportunity and they agreed to do business with Craven. And both parties had financial situations they both had to deal with. Craven was in dire straits. financially around that time, and New Line couldn't produce, or let's say lacked, the financial resources, for the company only really was a distributor at the time. Now, outside of those financial troubles, there were also bumps in the road as well for both sides, but they was able to put this film up by 1984. And originally casted as Freddy Krueger was the great actor, rest in peace, David Warner was the pick.
Your identity, detective.
But Warner dropped out because of scheduling conflicts. Jason Voorhees actor King Hodder was up next, but nah, they didn't want him. They wanted someone smaller than Hodder, and that would have been, and it would be, Robert Englund. Now, Englund had the ferocity to scare and go into dark places where other actors yield to or didn't want to go to. Now, I won't get on to all the casting and all that, but Craven wanted someone that can play opposite, someone very non-Hollywood for the role of Nancy, and that would become Heather Langenkamp, who appeared in commercials and one TV film while attending Stanford University in California. She beat out 200 other young women, with the rumors of Demi Moore and Courtney Cox being in the news as well. Langenkamp returned to the role of Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors and played a fictional version of herself as well. And then there was Johnny Depp in the first film role he ever starred in, I think it was right, as Glenn. Fun fact, Depp went to the audition with Jackie Earle Haley, a good friend of his who will actually take the role as Freddy in the 2010 reboot or remake, whatever you want to call it. That sucked. I will not go further. Well, the film was released on November 9th, 1984 on a $1.1 million budget, grossing up to $1.2 million in its opening weekend, for a total of $57 million worldwide at the box office. But the critics of Freddy Krueger, they did call him the most chilling figure in the genre, but since The Shape, aka Mike Myers, made his debut in 1978. But let's really get into the story of Freddy Krueger. Enough of the background. Before we go on with the show, how about you guys like, share, subscribe to Franchise History TV, even comment down in the comments down below. I'm also on Instagram at franchise_TV and on Twitter at TV_franchise. I also have two other channels if you guys are interested: Lone Wolf Adventure TV and Franchise 2 Sports. So yeah, subscribe to those three channels, and also like, share, subscribe on all three of them. I say subscribe 3 times. I'm done. Bye. For the younger generation, Freddy Krueger was the evil spirit of a child deleter who was burned to death by his victim's parents after escaping prison on a technicality after he was arrested. Well, this is what happened. The search warrant for his crimes was not signed in the right place.
You big dummy! You big dummy!
Now, Krueger goes on a spree of his victims in their dreams that will also cause the kids' demise in real life. In dreams, Freddy was invincible, but in real life, he could be destroyed, which I think was an interesting concept, to think the victims will have to avoid sleeping in order to avoid death, but also find a way to defeat this dangerous villain. Well, in the first film, he terrorizes kids on Elm Street in their dreams, feeding off their memories and fears of Freddy. The only way to ward off Krueger is not to fear him. Well, the protagonist Nancy thought this was an interesting strategy, but in the end, Freddy is still around. In the 1985 sequel, a sequel I do not like, everyone thinks Freddy is gone for good, but comes back to terrorizes the film's protagonist Jesse in his dreams as well, but this time Freddy uses Jesse's fear that causes Jesse to transform into Freddy to strike terror on more victims, ensuring a massacre of victims at a pool party later in the film. But Jesse is able to defeat Freddy in the end with some encouragement from Jesse's love interest in the film, Lisa. Freddy is turned to ash. But similar to the original film, Freddy is not defeated and finds a way to strike fear into Jesse and his friends once again. Well, I guess that's an interpretation. Well, it's not an interpretation. It really happened. What am I thinking? At Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, Freddy and Nancy clash again, with Freddy terrorizes young people in a psychotic hospital. Nancy is now a psychiatrist who teamed up with the troubled youth and Kristen and other kids to save a child from Krueger. Krueger is killed when the kids discover his remains and burn him. But in this film, we learn something about Krueger's background, We learn about his mother, Amanda, who suffered a terrible fate while working at the asylum. That terrible fate would give birth to Krueger.
Get ready. This August, your wildest dreams will come true.
How sweet. Fresh meat.
A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. The Dream Master.
Alright, not to tread lightly over Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, Freddy does return once again, and again, and again. But anyways, Kristen Parker, the girl that he previously stalked in the previous film, feels that Freddy is still around. She's right, he's resurrected. But he uses Kristen's best friend Alice to gain access to new prey, and she has powers, Kristen has powers or dreams and all kinds of kooky stuff. See, this is what happens when it comes to horror franchises. They get weirder and weirder with each movie. But anyways, spoiler alert, Kristen dies, but before she dies, she gives her powers to Alice, making Alice the Dream Master. As the Dream Master, Alice is able to save her friends that were killed by Freddy in this film, reciting a nursery rhyme, The Dream Master, forces Freddy to face his own reflection, releases the souls of Alice's friends out of Freddy, and it kills him. For now. Actually, this movie was quite well received by audiences and critics. It actually did well at the box office too, so I guess it ain't that bad.
Alright, Krueger. This time it's for keeps.
A Nightmare on Elm Street 5. The Dream Child.
It's a boy!
Transitioning to A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, one of the last slasher films of the 1980s. It's also described to be a gothic slasher, I guess. But anyways, in this film, Alex becomes pregnant, and of course Freddy is back in action, using Alice's future son as a conduct to kill. But we discover more about Freddy's origins once again, and his mother makes a return in this film. There's one thing that the production crew did for this film, was the makeup for Freddy Krueger. I think as time has gone by, he's gotten older, so they aged him just a little bit. In addition, Robert Englund had to portray his inmate father and a waiter as well.
I took all their children away from them. And now, that's over. Come on.
In the non-meta last film in this series, the 1991 film Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, we finally discover why Freddy became what he became. And I also forgot to mention, this also is a 3D film, the first out of New Line Cinema. As a kid, Freddy, he was adopted by an alcoholic man named Mr. Underwood, played by Alice Cooper himself, who terrorizes Krueger as a child, twisting the kid's mind up until Krueger had enough, and he decided to get rid of Mr. Underwood for good. Krueger is then sent on a terrible road, deleting animals, hurting himself. He marries a woman, but before he went on his murderous spree, he kills her, destroying the ones who bully him, doing all kinds of absolute wretched stuff. And we discover all of this through the eyes of his daughter, Catherine Krueger, aka Maggie, who enters the dream world to defeat Krueger once and for all. Now, we actually discovered that dream demons have continued to revive Freddy, and he can be killed if he's pulled into the real world. Oh, that's some real writing right there. Maggie rips Freddy's clothes glove, stabs him in the stomach, suspends him above the ground, blows him up with a pipe bomb, effectively killing him. The end. Now, Freddy Krueger is seen in cameos in that 1988 anthology series Freddy's Nightmares. In some episodes, we see the events of his trial and death. Many mishaps are committed in his trial and conviction, causing him to seek revenge on the people who did him wrong in life. And there's many mishaps in this TV show, because originally Freddy was acquitted of his crimes because someone forgot to sign the search warrant. Well, they changed it up in the show. Freddy's acquittal is based on an arresting officer not reading his Miranda rights. Well, anyway, Freddy does get his revenge on the arresting officer via a dentist's office. I won't go into too much of it. Now, this show lasted from 1988 to 19...
Cut the effect! stop him?
That person's you.
Why me?
But it was you that gave Nancy her strength.
Where's my son?
Freddy did not come back until 1994's Wes Craven meta flick, A New Nightmare, a film I actually enjoy. In this film, Freddy is described as an ancient evil, fictionalized by the Wes Craven. I said that wrong. Get it straight. He's an ancient evil spirit by the fictionalized Wes Craven. There you go. And I do say this, up until this point, Robert Englund had portrayed Freddy, in my opinion, it just comes off silly. But in this film, no, Wes Craven wanted Krueger in this film to represent power and ancient evil. In this version, he's ruthless as ruthless comes, going after Heather Langenkamp and her son, killing everyone in between. I like this version of Freddy. He was threatening, and making it a meta slasher was cherry on top. Plus, in this film, Freddy is responsible for the 1994 Northridge earthquake. Yeah, real meta. Well, Heather and her son Dylan destroyed the entity, aka Krueger as he's called, via furnace in the hellish construct of Freddy's boiler room.
Freddy versus Jason.
Now skip ahead 10 years later, Freddy does return again in the famous Freddy vs. Jason, a film that came out during the hype of seeing legendary horror villains fight each other. I guess Freddy was still locked in this hellish realm, but he is released to scare. But since the town has forgotten about him, he picks Jason to do his bidding, but that backfires when Jason Voorhees starts his own killing spree. But this film leaves something ambiguous. We do see Jason holding Freddy's head as Freddy winks, and then you skip ahead another couple of years. And you know what? I'm gonna say this about A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, the reboot. It couldn't do what the original did. But the original is so much better. But the reboot, the 2000 reboot, starring Rorschach, aka Jackie Earle Haley, this film tries, but it just, like I said, just does not compare to the original. But in this one, Freddy doesn't deal with, deleting children, but diddling children, which causes him the same fate like in the original film.
Rick, you little meatball. I love soul food.
In short, most of cinema's greatest vile horror villains are based on real criminals. Freddy Krueger takes the mold of criminals who experienced childhood trauma that wasn't really acknowledged or treated by professionals. It leads to many serious issues that we as viewers have seen from Krueger. Unfortunately, this is how some of the most vile serial murderers start off, born into terrible family situations. Family life is not the best. Either the kid is bullied or mistreated, and that builds up pent-up rage that when this kid becomes an adult, it leads to serious and deadly events. Freddy Krueger, as well to a point Michael Myers and many other villains, represent child neglect and damaging effects it can have on a kid, something that Robert Englund has stated in many interviews about his character of Freddy Krueger. Now, I do think Freddy is top 5 in horror film villains of all time. He's not my favorite, but I do say this, he does have a very creepy theme song. The girls that sing the song are actually supposed to represent the souls he has taken. Freddy, his theme song is creepy, but Michael Myers' theme song just gets you hype. I'ma just say that. That theme song for Michael Myers is hype music. As far as the future is concerned for this horror icon, he has been parodied plenty of times in notable TV shows like The Simpsons, Rick and Morty as well. But I think where Freddy needs to be immortalized is not in some half-written, watered-down reboot. I think we receive word that Mr. Englund is done with the character. Wes Craven has since left this realm, and I think where the franchise needs to go, I think it just, in my opinion, it just Stop. That's it. Because you know Hollywood has a knack for reviving franchises that don't need really reviving. In this case, we already hearing rumors of actor Kevin Bacon becoming a new Freddy Krueger. Well, we have seen so many times when Hollywood tries to reboot legendary horror film series. All you got to do is ask Texas Chainsaw and horror. Let's try that. Well, we have seen so many times where Hollywood tries to reboot the legendary horror film series. All you have to do is ask Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween and see how they doing now.
Bitch. Bon appetit,